We're delighted to be hosting our second In Conversation With session, which focuses on the topic of mental health. And I'm joined by Noa Burger, a workplace wellbeing and mental health specialist. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation, Noa. The first question I'd like to explore with you is around the relationship between mental health and work. And I'd love to hear what your views are on that.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. So I think there's lots of aspects to this. I might just focus on a couple. A stat that often gets used is that 1 in 6 workers experience mental ill health. So if this is something that's affecting between 15 and 20% of your workplace, then it makes sense to address it. But I think a more compelling statistic for me is that 6 in 6 people in your workplace have mental health. And what I mean by that is that in addressing mental health, we aren't just supporting those 1 in 6 who have a diagnosis of a mental illness. We're also supporting all your staff, because mental health, like physical health, is an umbrella term. It covers, it covers that mental fitness, feeling well. It covers illness, but it also covers a spectrum in between, that sort of feeling okay space that maybe quite a few of us are in. Mental health relates to how we think, how we feel, how we behave. So it's got to be at the heart of how we lead people, whether they are experiencing difficulty or not. So I think focusing on well-being is a really sustainable way of creating an environment that enables your people to be more productive, creative, resilient. But then I think there's another side to this that maybe often gets overlooked, which is the way in which the workplace influences our mental health. So work can be a really positive influence. It can be a protective factor for us. It gives us meaning and purpose, gives us goals, a sense of achievement, relationships, connection, structure, routine, which have been so important, particularly this last year during the pandemic. We felt how much we've missed them. But as well as being, an important part of our well-being and an important part of people's recovery when they're unwell, work can also be a risk factor for our mental health. When people experience what we call burnout, we usually think, what went wrong for that individual? They weren't managing their stress well enough, they worked too many hours, they didn't take enough breaks. But the research shows that the most common factors in burnout are more environmental factors. It's being unfairly treated at work. It's having an unmanageable workload. It's having a manager that doesn't communicate well or doesn't support you. So we need to tackle that at a more organizational level. So I think absolutely brilliant that we're doing more work around building individuals' resilience, helping managers spot the signs, but we also need to support employers to reflect on the impact that their own practices, their culture, their operating model has on people's mental health.
It's everybody's responsibility, isn't it? Not just that one person. So yeah, really, really valid. Thank you. Moving on, I'd be really interested to get your thoughts on what holds employers and employees back from stepping into this space. I'm sure you've got a lot to share on that.
Yeah, really important question, I think. I think 2 things strike me in the work that I do with organizations and with individuals. One is the underlying beliefs that we hold about mental health that are still there, even though we're talking more and more about the topic. I think we have to remember that many of the leaders of business today come from a generation in which they were taught, don't talk about this, it's private, it shows weakness, that kind of pull your socks up, man up language that we hope not to hear now, but those values are hard to unlearn and often quite unconscious. And I think it's a big ask for those same people to have to now prioritize this topic, sort of bring it into the light, make it their business, and be compassionate when they were taught not to do that for themselves, to not be very compassionate to themselves. So I think that's one of the main things that gets in the way. And a big part of what I try and focus on with people is trying to be curious about those different perspectives rather than judgmental. Because in the main, we all experience difficulties, disappointments, sometimes tragedies. But what's different is the ways in which we express them and the ways in which we cope. So I think there's something important there about just trying to see things from other people's perspectives. I think the other thing that really gets in people's way is a lack of confidence, just a fear of getting it wrong. And I think particularly amongst managers, there's a myth that they need to have the answers and they need to have solutions when their people bring them challenges. And we often say nothing if we're not sure what to say, but saying nothing has an effect too. So there's something about finding a balance between knowing your limitations, not going beyond your competence. You know, you're not a trained therapist, and you can do damage by saying the wrong thing. It might make someone less likely to come forward the next time. But at the same time, we don't need to overcomplicate this. It's about bringing a more human touch to working relationships. It's showing that you care, that you're concerned. It's really asking people how they are and noticing when they aren't themselves. And I think this is where training and guidance can really make a difference, because those are skills that anyone can learn, and actually they're valuable well beyond the space of mental health as well.
Yeah, really fair. It's that confidence piece, isn't it, around not saying anything is really hard to respond to. So yeah, fantastic, thank you. And lastly, if businesses and individuals were to do just one thing on mental health, what should it be?
So I would say listen. I do some voluntary work with a charity that works with people who are suicidal called The Listening Place, and their CEO says, forget this phrase, we need to talk about mental health, we need to listen about mental health. And I think that's really relevant. I think on an organizational level, that can be consulting and surveying your staff, which has been done really well during this pandemic. I think there's been a lot more kind of feedback coming from what staff need to keep well, to be productive. And I think continuing to gather that data and then listen to what it's saying so that you can make relevant changes is really important. And then I think there's listening on a more kind of one-to-one team level, which is really about focusing not on what you're going to say, but how you can connect with someone, listen to them, tune in to not just what they're saying, but also what they're expressing. And when you realize that you don't have to do that much, it's really rewarding. And from a practical level, you know, it gives managers a lot of information about how to work with that person. And then I think from the speaker angle, or the person who's experiencing some kind of difficulty, just being heard without judgment, without someone trying to take over, you know, can be enough for them to bounce back from a temporary low, or it can be an opportunity to signpost people to more professional support if that's needed. And those early conversations really can prevent things from escalating to a place where people need time off. So there's a real kind of commercial angle to this, as well as a values angle. So who do you want to be as an individual, as an organization? How do you want people to feel at the end of the day? Can we create an environment where people feel comfortable, safe, and committed and able to do their jobs? So I would absolutely say listening is where it has to start.
Super. Well, Noa, thank you so much for sharing your insight and knowledge. I'm sure it'll inspire and motivate others to take action and to ask those questions on this really important topic. So thank you.
Thanks, Kate.